Society as we know it was very different when I was a child. It's strange to say it and a bit cliché, but it's definitely true. Inclusivity, whether it be down to colour, race, sexuality, gender or religion, has become more and more important. This social acceptance also has bearings on the railways too. Now, I'm going to talk about a subject that some of you may not like. You may also be offended with the terms used in this video. I do not use any terms or names in any negative sense, nor to cause any intentional harm. If you are offended, I apologise. I feel that it's very important that we recognise why the terms and the ideologically is now socially unacceptable, and we need to recognise the history so we don't repeat it. I'm also going to talk about the darker history of the railway and, well, the not nice stuff. The term navvy came from the word navigator or navigations. The term was given to thousands of people who were employed building the first of the nation's canals and then the nation's railway structures. England was in a crisis. Factories and manufacturing were being slowed by an almost non-existent transport system. The roads were uneven, dangerous, and because horse and stagecoach was the only power source, freight had to be moved little and often. It often took days or even weeks to transport goods. With the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, it simply wasn't economical anymore to use horses, so another wet network had to be discovered. The answer came from the existing river systems. Powerful landowners would tap into existing river systems to make man-made rivers to their own homes. The boats would then traverse these man-made waterways and would carry food and provisions to the home. Because water carried little resistance, horses were able to pull much larger loads in comfort from the side of the river. Inspired by the landowners' success, merchants, businessmen and the gentry created the first ever canal network, reducing the cost of freight transportation and the cost of goods they moved such as coal and textiles. Before the waterways could be used, they had to be dug. This was where the navvies came in. They were men, either skilled or unskilled, that would be looking for work. Often degraded and looked down upon, the navvies would be paid pittance in today's standard for hours and hours of back-breaking work as they dug out the canals with just the basic shovel and spade. They worked long hours in all-weather terrain and little thought was given to their health and safety and were expected to move about 20 tons a day. It was commonplace that accidents would occur, and if a navvy died, the builder or owners of the project would think little of it as there was surplus men waiting to work. Many original navvies were local lads who were originally farm workers, but some came from other projects. Due to the lack of movement of the masses, everyone tended to know everyone else in smaller towns and villages. Newcomers were generally shunned and forced to live in shanty huts in temporary settlements. There was no laws protecting the workers, and many came into conflict with the townsfolk, but especially on payday when they would hit the local tavern. Their work and drinking angered the locals, who were often accused of driving down the locals' wages, taking their jobs and causing violence. Over time though, the navvies learned valuable skills, which soon reached becoming masters of their trade. By 1790, the skilled navvies were still looked upon down by the upper classes, but for businesses, they were highly sought after. Fast forward to the 1830s. The canal system was over 2,000 miles long and healthy. In fact, too healthy. It monopolised the freight transport market and wealthy businessmen could charge as much as they pleased and take as long as they wanted. The faster the freight needed to be, the more the men would charge. The railways burst the canal's puddle practically overnight. Railways had the distinct advantage of being faster to lay, faster to remove, and take up less space than canals. Rails could go practically anywhere. The men moved from the water to laying rails. Life laying the rails and building the tunnels and bridges were just as bad as working for the canal network. The contractors cared little for the men they employed. Safety was of little concern. All they cared about was speed. Children, young boys as old as 10, would often work shoulder to shoulder with men late into their 60s. The work was long, often going through the night, and as a result it was considered less dangerous going to war than working on the railway. A lot of people think of navvies as being predominantly Irish migrants, but in reality it's only partly true. The Great Potato Blight was sweeping the fields, stripping millions of their food supply. The famine claimed more than 1 million lives and caused the largest mass movement of people from an island in recorded history. The railway boom was in full swing, and the railway companies were happy to take on the extra labourers to build the network. Almost 200,000 navvies were recorded in 1845, with the majority being Irish, laying over 20,000 route miles. If you had less than 1 death per mile, you were generally having a good day. The discrimination the English gave the navvies often escalated into physical fighting, often with alcohol involved on both sides. The English, angered by the Irish coming over and accepting more work for lower pay, were whipped into a frenzy by several leading newspaper articles. It only took small sparks to create flames. One example occurred in 1830. A Scottish boxer was killed in a fight against an Irishman, Simon Byrne. Byrne was arrested for manslaughter, but was acquitted. The locals, incensed by the acquittal, rose against their Irish residents and rioted for 2 days, beating the Irish populace and burning their houses, even their chapel. Railway companies did try to quell any fight by segregating the navvies into their own respective country. Each nationality had their own section to work on, and were well away from each other and lived apart in their shanty towns. Segregation worked well in its own way, but it never sorted any underlying issues. Railway workers would clash wherever they met, often becoming violent, and there was even some type of civil war. Payday was a particular time for trouble. The men would be paid in pubs, and many would spend most of the money there or be forced to pay debts for provisions at the local Tommy shop. Nearly every railway would see some form of fighting over the coming years. The English would regularly attack the Irish workers in an effort to force them off the lines. In one particular nasty clash, John Stevenson, a renowned railway contractor, sheltered the Irish men in a goods yard while the yeoman cavalry and 40 artillerymen were caused to calm the raging English. The fighting got increasingly worse and worse, with the Englishmen being called out several times for their behaviour. The bigotry was deep in English hearts, and mothers would regularly tell their children to behave, otherwise the Irish navvy would come and take them away. On Monday, the 9th of February 1846, on the Lancashire and Carlisle Railway, the contractors were getting the men into their segregated areas. The Irish worked at the north of Penrith, with the English working from the south. Where the two nationalities met in the middle was where the trouble began. An English ganger, drunk and fed up, tried to force an Irish worker to pick up a shovel and drop his pick. The Irishman refused, with his comrades backing him up, and assaulted him. The English called upon his friends, who drove the Irishman off the line. The Irishmen gathered their numbers in their camp and armed themselves with whatever they could find. They drove the English out of the area. The Irish could have looted and burned the English camps to their heart's desire, but they decided to leave the camp as is. On Wednesday, the 11th of February, the Irish awoke to 2,000 Englishmen baying for their blood. The Englishmen attacked the Irish, burning their camp, robbing of everything, leaving one man dead. The English were not done yet. They raided the town of Penrith, pulling Irish men and women from their homes to give them a sounding beating. It took troops from the cavalry to quell the English and a well-mannered priest to stop any Irish retaliations. On the 28th of February that same year, 200 navvies were waiting for their monthly pay in the pub. The alcohol fueled the men's anger, and soon a simple dispute about a missing watch escalated into violence. A passing police officer heard the commotion, but was attacked and killed with a pickaxe handle. The English and the Scottish navvies, hearing of the violence, marched on the Irish navvies' camp, burning the camp to the ground. Over 1,500 men marched to drive the Irish out, and once again the army was drafted in to quell the fighting. The English and the Scots were not the only ones that would prejudice the Irish. In May, North Wales, Welsh workers, hearing that the Irish workers were seeking employment on their lines, took matters into their own hands. 300 Welshmen attacked the Irish workers with such brutality that the Riot Act was read, and the police were actually afraid to arrest the ringleaders themselves, so requested military aid. In 1815, the fighting would reach its crescendo. The new Stirling and Dunfermline line had just been completed, and the Irish navvies were receiving their end-of-line payoff. No one knows what started the trouble, but long-lingering grudges between the navvies and the locals would explode into booze-fueled violence. The fighting became a free-for-all, with 3,000 locals gathering to drive out the navvies who had lived and worked in Dunfermline for many years and had started families there. They marched on the workers to North Queensferry and had every intention of getting them shipped out of the country. Hearing of the mass cleansing, Scottish miners attempted to do the same thing. Once again, the military had to step in and stop the locals. Very few, if any, Irish navvies went back to Dunfermline. Some simply collected final possessions, then left, leaving the town forever. Religion was another powerful factor to consider for many navvies. The vast majority of Irish navvies were mostly Catholics, not great in a majority Church of England country. The Catholic faith saw a door to gain a foot back onto UK soil, and on the 29th of September, the Roman Catholic Church re-established itself back into English society and its hierarchy. Millions of people protested this move, and whipped up by the media, blamed the navvies for bringing the church back. Anti-Catholic riots sprang up all over the country and would continue for the next 20 years. Thanks to progressively better working conditions and pay, many navvies had established themselves at this point with affordable housing and equal pay. The navvy riots would eventually peter out. Men starting on the railways as basic workers were now very highly skilled and were being recognised for their efforts. Children who at one time was forced to work with no education were now being taught to read and write, and homes were no longer made of tin, rather bricks and mortar. The contractors were forced to pay their employees a regular wage, with new laws appealing for better and safer working conditions. There was still a lot to do, but at least it was a good start. As time would pass, the benefits of the navvies in the community would be seen by all. The railways they built were vital for the life of towns. People could now travel where they pleased, and the skills navvies had learned they would apply to other projects around their local area. Soon, many would see that these men were a blessing, with some even daring to call them friends. Let's fast forward again to today. Today, navvy is now a term you don't normally hear, and to some it still causes offence. It's amazing that we are still seeing the same level of bigotry and hatred in some people that we saw against the navvies over 120 years ago. Age, sexuality, colour, nationality, gender, and even the colour of your hair can sometimes cause some to oust others. As the world is now a smaller place thanks to social media, some think that they can hide behind a computer to speed their hate and indifference, thinking that a fake name and a VPN can screen them. Luckily though, there is hope. More and more companies, large and small, are recognising equality as one of their core values. Network Rail has created the Everyone Matters strategy, a plan for 2024 focusing on 4 key values: always safe, a place to work that is free from unsafe behaviour, care about people, treating people how you'd want to be treated. Teamwork is key, about mutual support no matter what, and empowered to act, doing the right thing for the network, passengers, and ensuring that barriers are removed that are preventing people from acting. It's a great scheme, and I've left a link to it in the description. Another way the railway is helping is by spreading awareness, particularly in the LGBTQ communities. One of the most colourful trains on the network is effectively known as the Pride Train. This Avanti West Coast Pendolino is wrapped head to toe in stunning pride colours, making it the largest pride flag in the UK. Thanks to the pandemic, pride events up and down the country were forced to cancel. The Pride Train took on the gauntlet of spreading awareness along its 265-metre flank. The train was run with an LGBTQ exclusive crew for its initial run and is jam-packed full of literature, education, stories and posters all about the history of Pride, spreading awareness wherever it goes. Even the tannoy gets in on the action, giving fun facts during your journey. The train was given the name Progress a month after it was launched, and today Progress is still on the tracks, still making everyone smile with its unique livery and amazing story. This week is Hate Crime Awareness Week in the UK. Even though it's nearly the end of the week when this video is released, I feel it was pretty apt to cover the Navvies and recognise and thank them for their hard work. It's so unfair to see how they were treated, and it's unfair today that some don't appear to have learned from our history. It doesn't matter who or what they are. It doesn't matter what the colour of their skin is, what gender they are, or even if they don't like their pronouns. Everyone has a lifetime to give on this earth. And what right has anyone got to judge you?